Any other question or response? No.
Sir, thank you so much for such a wonderful talk on Raymond Williams. I'm pretty sure that all of us who have not read his Culture is Ordinary will now read it, because you have now sparked a curiosity on Raymond Williams. So it was very interesting to learn about how Raymond Williams radically imagined the concept of culture, and how he brought in the concept of cultural materialism, and also about the difference between cultural materialism and new historicism. So thank you so much for such an entertaining talk. We really had a good time. Thank you, sir.
Since we lag in time, we will go directly to the next session. Elsa?
So our second talk is on Gabriel Okara by Dr. Rosemary Palatty. I invite Surya Lakshmi to introduce Dr. Rosemary Palatty.
Good morning, everyone. I heartily welcome Dr. Rosemary Palatty, Assistant Professor from Sri Shankara College, Palatty. She is a profound scholar specialized in the area of culture and identity politics, power relation, and feminism. I am enthusiastic to listen to her talk on Gabriel Okara as a part of this e-conference. A warm welcome to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, the Research and the Department of English, DEVA KURAVILANGAD College, for inviting me for this talk. I think this fabulous 14, this national conference, is going to be a roller coaster ride, because I was completely immersed in the talk of Joshi sir, and now I've been entrusted with the task of introducing Gabriel Okara. From Raymond Williams to Gabriel Okara, from cultural studies to Nigerian literature, from Britain to Nigeria. Definitely, it's going to be a ride full of sharp turns and curves. And let me tell you at the beginning of my talk that actually that the way Joshi sir talked right now, like that spontaneous overflow of powerful thoughts directly from his brain, I'm unable to do that. I have a script with me, so let me begin. I think most of us are familiar with Okara, as his poem Mystic Drum has been in the MG University UG English syllabus. However, this responsibility provided me an opportunity to dig deeper into the works of Okara, and was completely surprised to see him as a multi-genre person. This talk is targeted towards the young minds because I feel Gabriel Okara is preeminent within a post-colonial discourse. There is another interesting aspect also. He's a modernist writer. If you are interested, you can compare him to British modernist. Most importantly, these are just starting points for further exploration. In 2017, the University of Port Harcourt's Institute of Arts and Culture conducted the Gabriel Okara Literary Festival. It was a 2-day festival to honor one of Nigeria's foremost literary lights, Gabriel Okara. It turned out to be a historic gathering of intellectuals, literary icons, scholars, and some of the most creative minds in Nigeria. In her welcome address, Director of the Institute of Arts and Culture and convener of the festival, Professor Julie Okoke said, I quote, "Contrary to the convention of celebrating the dead, it's our strong conviction that we should learn to celebrate our heroes while they are still living. Gabriel Okara is one of the pioneers of modern African literature, the first renowned English language Black African poet, the first African modernist writer, and the first Nigerian writer to publish in influential literary journals." Unquote. Gabriel Imomotimi Gabaingban Okara was born on 24 April 1921 into a noble Ijo family. His father, Samson G. Okara, was an Ijo chief and businessman. His mother, MATHA Olodiama Okara, was a homemaker. His birthplace, Beaumoundi, was later renamed as Bayelsa State, is situated in the Niger Delta. Niger Delta, a dense natural landscape of rainforest, mangrove swamps, and rivers, extend over 25,000 square miles. It plays an important role in the literary career of Okara. Ijo community believes that they are one of the oldest human presences there. Traditionally, the water and rivers in particular hold an appropriately sacred place in Ijo identity and sensibilities. Okara's literary career began with the poem The Call of the River Nun. It was written in the year 1950 and won Silver Cup in Poetry at the 1953 Nigerian Festival of Arts. It was published in the 1957 inaugural issue of Black Orpheus, the first English journal of African literature. The poem was about the river Nun situated in Rivers State in Nigerian Delta. Okara begins the poem by stating that he hears the voice of a river calling him. I quote, "I hear your call. I hear it far away. I hear it break the circle of these crouching hills." Unquote. We can also take this as the inner voice from the self. He wishes to be like the trees on the banks of the river. I quote, "To watch my mirrored self unfold and span my days with song from the lips of dawn." Unquote. He calls the trees on the banks of the river as fortunate ones because they are always beside the river. Some believe that Okara himself was blessed to begin his literary career with the call of the river Nun, because Ijo community believes that prior to physical birth, human beings dwell for a time among water spirits. Ijo people throughout their earthly life carry out specific rites, prayers, and public observances, including dance, song, mask dramas, and processions to ensure that their earthly community remains in harmony with the river spirits among whom they first lived. So when Okara writes, I quote, "I want to view your face again and feel your cold embrace," unquote, we realize that it's about his sacred connection with water life. The sound of the river that invokes the ghost of a child within him is about that fluid, physical identity of his. We can see the beginning of an abundant use of riverine imagery and an abiding consciousness of union with the natural environment from the very first poem itself. His later poems, The Piano and the Drums and Mystic Drum, portray the devastating effect of colonialism in African culture. I think a slice of history, especially that of Nigeria, is inevitable in this context. Dark continent, as Africa was derogatively addressed by Europeans, was both mysterious and exotic to them. Europeans began exploration, trade, and missionary endeavors along the west coast of Africa in the 15th century. The Portuguese were the first to do so, establishing trade with the Benin Kingdom in Lagos and other regions along the coast. Portuguese dominance of these trade routes was overpowered in the 16th century by the British, French, and Dutch. Slave trade became important during this time. Slaves were taken from Nigeria to work on plantations in the Americas. It was known as the period of Atlantic slave trade. Nigeria lost great numbers of people to slave trade. The British dominated the slave trade of the Nigerian coast in the 18th century. But with the rise of industrial revolution in Great Britain in the 19th century, the emphasis in trade shifted from slaves to raw materials such as cotton, cocoa, groundnuts, palm oil, and palm kernel. Lagos was the first part of Nigeria to become a British colony in 1861. Nigeria became a British protectorate in 1901. It was always the oil that attracted the British. Earlier, it was palm oil. By the 1950s, crude oil discovery in the Niger Delta redefined the concept of oil. It also redefined the political map of Nigeria. Now, Nigeria is one of the largest oil producers in the world. Now to his poems. Through the poem, The Piano and the Drums, Okara presents the unending clash or conflict between African culture and European culture. Communities within Africa changed substantially as a result of their contact with the Europeans. Poet begins the poem. I quote, "When at break of day at riverside, I hear jungle drums telegraphing the mystic rhythm, urgent, raw, like bleeding flesh, speaking of primal youth and the beginning." Unquote. In the poem, drums stand for African culture. Drum is an instrument of communication that has its own language. Wole Soyinka and Dio Fagunwa in The Forest of 1,000 Demons has commented that it is the wise who dance to it and the learned who understand its language. The sound of the drum is mystical to the poet. It creates agility, strength, and quickness of action. Poet sees panther, leopard, hunters with spears. It's all about the native culture of Africa. It was all they knew and were content. But this world collapsed with the arrival of Europeans. Poet continues, I quote, "Then I hear a wailing piano solo speaking of complex ways in tear-furrowed concerto of faraway lands and new horizons." Unquote. The change in the sound came with a different musical instrument. This new sound brings along with musical technicalities that are unknown to the native African. Concerto, diminuendo, and crescendo are new to the Africans. In the place of mystic rhythm, the wailing sound of piano makes the poet, I got, lost in the labyrinth of its complexities, unquote. This ambivalent situation is beautifully captured in the last 4 lines. I quote, and I, lost in the morning mist of an age, at a riverside, keep wandering in the mystic rhythm of jungle drums and the concerto, unquote. One interesting aspect here is that Okara was an excellent piano player. Mystic drum shows the damaging effect of colonialism on the spiritual pulse of African life. Poet begins, I quote, the mystic drum in my inside, and fishes danced in the rivers, and men and women danced on land to the rhythm of my drum, unquote. When the mystic drum was beating, everything was fine with the humans and nature. There was happiness and harmony. When it was beating, there was a lady standing behind a tree, smiling and watching everything. I got, but standing behind a tree with leaves around her waist, she only smiled with a shake of her head, unquote. This lady seems to be showing indifference to the rich culture of Africa. Lady with leaves around her waist can be Eve, so we can assume that the refrain hints at Christian religion. Later, when the mystic drum stops beating, the normal life in Africa gets disrupted. Transfiguration of fishes into humans and humans into fishes all stopped. Life becomes dry, logical, and mechanical. At that moment, leaves start sprouting on the woman. She starts to flourish on the land. I quote, with roots sprouting from her feet and leaves growing on her head and smoke issuing from her nose and her lips parted in her smile turned cavity belching darkness, unquote. Ultimately, the speaker is left in belching darkness, spiritual darkness. A powerful and passionate attack towards the Oriental perspective of Europeans can be seen in the poem, You Laughed and Laughed and Laughed. Okara begins, I quote, in your ears, my song is motor car misfiring, stopping with a choking cough, and you laughed and laughed and laughed, unquote. These lines portray how Africans were looked down upon by the Europeans. Later, in the poem, Okara portrays the inhuman treatment of Europeans toward Africans. I quote, you laughed at my song, you laughed at my walk, unquote. Africans were considered as a pre-civilized limbo or a historical void by the Europeans. Speaker in the poem strongly criticizes such a stand of Westerners and tells them that their laughter is ice block laughter. He calls them numb, inhuman people who have no consideration towards others. Ice block laughter has frozen their inside, their voices, their ears, their eyes, and their tongues. They are lifeless. Then speaker compares his laughter to the fire. I quote, my laughter is the fire of the eye of the sky, the fire of the earth, the fire of the air, the fire of the seas and the rivers, fishes, animals, trees. And it thawed your inside, thawed your voice, thawed your ears, thawed your eyes and thawed your tongue. Unquote. Poet claims that the fire in his laughter can thaw the ice-block laughter of Europeans. When the shadow of a European asks him, why so, why there is fire in your laughter, we see the proud African in Okara answering, I quote, because my father and I are owned by the living warmth of the earth through our naked feet. Unquote. The living warmth of the earth owned through their naked feet creates that fire that comes from all elements of earth. Okara makes clear that they are the real inheritors of the land. Their ways of living are closer to the nature. So-called civilized people doesn't know its worth. At times, Okara gets self-critical. In the poem, Once Upon a Time, he laments and critiques modernity. Modern ways of living have taken away childhood innocence and primeval purity. He presents the degeneration and demoralization of the modern world. The poem is in the form of a lively conversation between a father and a son. I quote, Once upon a time, son, they used to laugh with their hearts and laugh with their eyes, but now they only laugh with their teeth. Unquote. Poet feels nostalgic about the lost values and morals in African life. He seems to be shocked by the change of lifestyle. He ridicules artificial relationships and manners prevailing in the present world. He's unhappy about his own pretentiousness. I quote, and I have learned too to laugh with only my teeth and shake hands without my heart. I have also learned to say goodbye when I mean good riddance, to say glad to meet you without being glad, and to say it has been nice talking to you after being bored. Unquote. Speaker wishes to unlearn all these pretentious and fake behaviors. He tells his son, I quote, I want to unlearn all these muting things. Most of all, I want to relearn how to laugh. Unquote. A modernist plea to go back to the roots is clearly visible in these lines. Nigerian nationalism also appears in the poems of Okara. In Spirit of the Wind, poetic persona worries about his caged condition. I quote, my stork is caged in singed hair and dark skin. Unquote. The coming home storks awaken the freedom instinct within the poet. The ringing of the angelus make him ask the question why the Savior is not coming to rescue them. The Angelus is Roman Catholic devotion commemorating the incarnation of Jesus. Church bells ring at morning, noon, and sunset, announcing the Angelus. Here, the speaker doesn't move from his place when he hears the ringing of Angelus and asks, when will the Savior come to rescue them? On 3rd February 1960 in Cape Town, British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan, while addressing the Parliament of South Africa, made his famous Wind of Change speech. I quote, the wind of change is blowing through this continent, and whether we like it or not, this growth of national consciousness is a political act. Unquote. 1960 saw the liberation of 17 sub-Saharan nations from European imperial and colonial rule. This year is known as the Year of Africa. On October 1st, Nigeria got independence. It was not an easy journey for Nigeria, especially after the discovery of crude oil in the Niger Delta. Okara's experimental novel, The Voice, is about the disillusionment experienced by many Nigerians in the first years of independence. Okara, in one of his interviews, has stated that he wrote The Voice because of the inconsistencies of their rulers after the British had left Africa. I quote, "In the fight for independence, our politicians denounced certain measures and attitudes of the colonial government only to perpetrate the same ones when they took over." Unquote. Okara narrates the story of a young African, Okolo, whose name means the voice. After having Western education, Okolo returns to his hometown and begins a search for something which is simply called it. Throughout the book, it is that indefinable something which gives integrity, honesty, spiritual values, faith in God and men, and a sense of purpose. Okolo wants to have this it inside the political authorities and the population of Amatu. Okolo and Chief Izongo are two poles of antagonism in the narrative, two opposing forces. Chief Izongo is characteristic of post-independence African dictators who maintain the people in submission but enjoy many privileges in their political system. He is helped by a college of elders with whom he manipulates his fellow citizens. Okolo's search causes the village elders to first exile and finally to execute him after he defiantly returns to Amatu. Okongo in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart and Okolo in The Voice give us two different pictures of the same land. Former was disillusioned with the colonial culture and the latter with the neo-colonial culture. Both showed the temerity to question the system, and death was their reward. The most striking feature of The Voice is its Ijo-English hybridity. As it was difficult to express his Africanness in a non-African language, Okara transliterated Ijo into English in some sections, ignoring the so-called traditional British syntax. Sentences like Okolo had no chest and your head is not correct are perfect examples of this transliteration. Courage is indicated in Ijo language as chest. So here, he has no chest means he's timid. The poem, The Fisherman's Invocation, like The Voice, is concerned with Nigeria's attainment of the status of political independence. It won the 1979 British Commonwealth Prize for the Best Poem of the Year. It's about the birth of a new nation. In the poem, two fishermen, denoted as A and B, are talking. It takes place on a river in Niger Delta. The first speaker is clearly confident in the power of history and traditional culture to pave way for a new and progressive post-independence nation. The second one is diffident. In the poem, the past is represented as back, the present as today, and the future as friend. When the fishermen cast their net into the river, What they catch is a mirror of the past. Speaker A has confidence in the catch and urges his friend to draw it into the canoe, for they will learn something from it. I got, draw gently, draw carefully, don't let it slip. Draw it up into the canoe and let's hold it in our palms, the back, the gods, even for only one still moment, one teaching moment. Unquote. When the second speaker was burdened with doubts regarding post-independent nation, the second speaker tells him that for the future to be born, we must reckon with the lessons of the past. Even one teaching moment is enough. Of the many poems characterized by riverine imagery, the Fisherman's Invocation immerses the reader in the world of Delta. Philosophical worldview is also present in the poem. Biafran War of Independence or Nigerian Civil War played a major role in the life of Okara. It was a secessionist move from Biafra to form an independent state. Okara's war poems capture all the frightful, terrible, and horrid aspects of the war. They were first published in Black Orpheus in 1974 under the general title Out of the War. War poems such as Metaphor of a War, Leave Us Alone, Suddenly the Air Cracks, Crows on the Moon, and Expendable Name in general express his touching concern for suffering humanity. The image of the helpless victims can be seen in the man drained of flesh and blood, and the young with swollen feet with nothing between skin and bone in the poem Expendable Name, as well as in the woman with skin shrunken to the bone and her kids tottering with balloon stomachs in the metaphor of a war. Suddenly the Air Cracks is about the air attacks and how life returns to normal after the air raids have taken their toll. I quote, suddenly the air cracks with striking, cracking rockets, guffaw of Bofors, stuttering LMGs, jets diving, shooting, glasses dropping, breaking from lips, people diving under beds, nothing, bullets flashing fire, striking, writhing bodies and walls. Unquote. Planes spitting fire and danger during day turns to a symbol of hope in Crows on the Moon. Red Cross planes distribute relief materials during the night. Crows on the Moon seems to contrast the insecurity of the day with the peace and serenity of the night. In Suddenly the Air Cracks, people scramble in fear at the sight of the jets, but in Crows on the Moon, even mothers ran out to collect relief materials. The poem, Expendable Name, is about the nonchalant attitude of the world to the suffering of the Biafran people. I quote, I am only expendable name, thrown back and forth in ritual jogs in corridors of sacrificial shrines. And not for your ears, for that would break the spell which makes me only a name. As we stagger, my young and I, with nothing between skin and bone, into the gathering darkness. Unquote. It mocks the indifference of the outside world to the sufferings of the Biafrans. Okara's war poems record the tension and horrors of war, the sufferings of war victims, the absence of love caused by war, and the insensitivity of men to others' predicaments. Throughout the Biafran War of Independence, Okara remained a committed Biafran. He worked as the director of the Cultural Affairs Division of the Biafran Ministry of Information. He traveled frequently to Europe and the United States to gain support for the Biafran cause, sometimes on reading tours with Achebe. A large body of manuscripts, including poems, short stories, and a second novel were destroyed by the Nigerian federal troops during that time, which is actually a loss to the literary community. The ghost of Biafra still continues to haunt Nigeria. Several of the poems collected in The Dreamer, his vision, bear witness to the anarchy and confusion of the post-Civil War era in Nigeria. It backed him the LNG Nigerian National Prize for Literature. Even as a young boy, uncertainties created by war was familiar to Okara. At the age of 14, Okara was sent to Government College, Umuahia, an elite college preparatory school. He continued there till the outbreak of World War II. College was converted to a detention camp for prisoners by the authorities, so Okara was briefly transferred to Yaba Higher College near Lagos. It was from there he appeared for his senior Cambridge School certificate exam. Okara fondly remembers the impact Umuahia College had on his formative years. It was there the habit of reading was cultivated in him. While at school, he read famous English authors. Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka, and Kenzaro Viva are also the famous alumni of this prep school. Okara started writing poems when he read Wordsworth's poem, The Spring. He was immensely touched by it that he felt an urge to write poems. Okara was essentially a lyric poet. Free verse was more convenient to him. It allowed an uninterrupted flow of thought and feeling for him. He never allowed the structure of the poem to control the theme of the poem. Long before Okara's own first poems were published, he had devoted a considerable period to translate Ijo lyrics into English. His expertise in translation helped him to overcome the difficulties in transferring African imagery, ideas, philosophy, and so on into a foreign language. A large body of his work bear witness to it because Okara beautifully delivers an English that sings, chants, and dances Ijo. Okara has also written children's literature, Little Snake and Little Frog, and An Adventure to Juju Island. Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka, and Gabriel Okara can be called the Triad of the Nigerian literature. Even though they belong to different ethnic communities, Achebe was an Igbo, Soyinka a Yoruban, and Okara an Ijo. And they even adopted different themes and styles of writing. They all succeeded in presenting Africa and its uniqueness and richness to the world. it doesn't mean that Nigerian literature comprises only of male writers. There are eminent Nigerian women writers. Flora Napa, who's known as the mother of African literature, Buchi M. Cheta, Helen Oyen, Sainab Alkali, and Chimamananda Ngozi Adichie are some among them. Once an interviewer asked Okara, "Writers are said to be agents of change, but writers like you have been writing for many years and yet nothing seems to change, especially in Nigeria." I would like to conclude with the answer given by Okara. Writers express their own ideal society, the kind they would like to live in. And sometimes they forecast what the society in which they live will become in future. But everything depends on the leadership. Leaders bring physical changes. The kind of change that writers bring about is that attitude. And attitudinal change takes a long time. Sometimes it takes generations before some changes could be noticed. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for this wonderful session. You have taken us to the world of Nigeria through the poems of Gabriel Okara. It was really wonderful. And what about, he has the politics, especially with regard to the Biafran movements, and also regarding, black movements. Especially he celebrates the negritude. And he was, I think he was called, the Nigerian negritudist. Yeah, how do you respond?
He was always proud of his culture. And he, when an interviewer asked him, who really is your audience? Okay, and he replied that, see, I'm not actually writing, my audience is not here in Africa. Okay, I aim at a very large, big audience to whom I can reach, or I can reach the culture, or the thing which